Let me show you a preview of what we're going to be building. It's very cool and I'm excited to show it to you. So once we log in and we go to Ask Jack, we're greeted by this forum that we're going to be building in this video. And notice we can search. It filters very quickly. We can ask a question. So my awesome new question, please help. And then we can see that awesome new question here. And if it's my question, I can edit it. I've left this label of this button for your homework, so you can change that to edit if we're editing. The same form, the same component is being used for creating the question and for updating the question. I will update the question and then we will see, please help now. I could also delete. So we'll be doing all of that. So we'll go through the entire motions of CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. And you're going to learn a ton about Nuxt. So let's jump into it. The fundamental building blocks of any application are CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to do that in Nuxt 3. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to like and subscribe. All right, quickly, we will take stock of where we are so far, and then we can go into what we're going to learn in this video. So section 4 is what you want to check out if you would like to code along in this video. Section 5 will already have the code from this video, as always. So if we run our dev server using yarn dev, so we can sign up, we can sign in. I'll sign in here. We'll create this dashboard in a second. We can go to our premium membership and then we can sign up using Stripe and they will send us to their checkout. If we create a subscription here, then we'll be redirected back to our app where we can then manage our subscriptions also on a Stripe page. And we can do things like check out our invoices. We could cancel our subscription and all of that cool stuff. Now what we would like to do is create this Ask Jack forum. And here people will be able to ask questions and help other people out when they have questions. And it will be a place where people can just exchange information. But before we do that, let's start by creating a dashboard, something very simple so that whenever we log in, we don't get hit with this 404. Back in the application under pages, I'll just go ahead and paste in a dashboard here. Notice I've used the define meta page and we're using a middleware here. This auth middleware is something we created in a previous episode and it just checks to see if there is a user and they're logged in. And if not, we get sent to the root of the application, so the home page. And other than that, this could be a div as well. It doesn't need to be a button. Other than that, it's just saying welcome to the dashboard. So I'll restart the server since I added a new page. A lot of times I need to do that. And then we hit this dashboard. So if we log out and log in just to check the user experience, and then we hit this dashboard. Of course, in the future, this dashboard is going to have a ton of cool stuff. But for now, we just want to stop landing on that 404 page. Now, what we would like to do is create a page where we can ask questions. So create, read, update, delete. First one's create. So what we want to do is be able to ask a question in this Ask Jack. Right now, this goes to /search because once everything is said and done, it would make sense for the users to have to search or at least get the opportunity to search before they ask a question that has perhaps already been answered. So we would like to have this URL be the page where people can ask a question. So askjack/ask. Also under pages, I'll create a page called, or a directory called Ask Jack. And then inside of that directory, we'll create ask.view. Here, we will add our script tags. Then we'll add a couple of components, which we'll build in a second. Also, we want this to be protected by auth so that, bots aren't asking questions. And then for our template, it's pretty simple. We'll have our wrappers here just for making things pretty. And then we'll have the sidebar and this question form components. We can format all that real quick. And then we can get into building these components. So components, elements, question form dot view. And if we go into components, elements, here we'll create this question form dot view. Here as well, we'll add our script tags. We'll use the middleware for auth middleware. We'll use the router. And then for our question, we'll have a reactive from view and we'll have a title and description for each question. When we post a question, once we have gotten our response, we'll get just the ID from that question, and then we'll push to a page where that question is shown. So Ask Jack question and then with the ID. That is all we'll need for the script. And for the template, we just have a form, which we are using this post question function. And then we are vModel binding to our data title and description here. Very simple view. And on the click, we're posting on the button. Let's go ahead and create these types real quick. If we go to types, we'll create first the iQuestion.ts. And this is what I will use for the type. So which means we're going to have an answer type as well. So you can pause and copy that if you like. And then we will add a answer type.ts as well. And here we'll just have the text, who it is and what their name is. Then if we go back to the question form, then we have to make this type, this question post type.ts, and that here. So just a bit of information. The reason I actually create these types, we could just leave them untyped and it would be inferred, but we want to be able to use these types elsewhere. So for example, in the API, it's going to be useful to be able to say what this type is when we're receiving it from use body. So when we're checking out the body, we're going to know this is the type that we're expecting. All right, with that there, then we just need to create this AskJack sidebar. And this sidebar is very, very simple. So also in the components elements, if you've seen my channel before, you know I don't like to spend a lot of time on templates. So I will just breeze through this so that we can get going on the functionality of things. Basically, we have two Nuxt links, which lead to the ask and search page. And the rest of it isn't going to be used in this tutorial. It's just a nice looking sidebar. You can make your sidebar look like whatever you want. It doesn't have to look the same, but if you want it to be the exact same, just check out the repo. All right, now let's check out our AskJack page. That's pretty, at least in my opinion. And if we were to submit this form, let's just go ahead and do that. The keen eye of most of you will know that we have not created an API endpoint. So we're going to get a 404, which makes a lot of sense. So what we need to do now is to create an endpoint for this form to go to. So we see we're submitting to API AskJack ask. So let's go down in the server in the API. And here's where we're going to get busy creating this endpoint. All right, first thing, we'll add our imports. Then we'll create an event handler where we get the body from use body, and we want to get the auth token from the request and from use cookie. And then we're going to get the user from this session token. Then we're going to grab the body and notice this type here that we just created earlier. So now we already know what type it is expecting. Then we're going to create the question in the database, and we're going to pass on the body and the user ID. Now, we've done it correctly here, but I just want for you to keep something in mind when you're building something on your own. It might be obvious, it might not be. But what you would not want to do is in this form, so here you wouldn't want to do something like pass the author ID here, right? And the reason is you know, clever people could go in and they could see, oh, I can give up any author ID I want. That question would seemingly be asked by someone else when in fact it was a nefarious actor. Make sure that you're always getting the logged in user on the server side to prevent any, malicious actors. And then we'll need to create this repository, this AskJack repository, so that we can ask the question and save it into the database. So if we go under database repositories, let's create that new AskJack repository .ts. And of course, we'll need to import Prisma. And then we'll add this create function where we accept the data and the author ID, and we simply save it to the database. Now, I will restart the server for good measure. And with a bit of luck, we should be able to save a question to the database. So cool beans. I haven't heard that phrase in a while. Cool beans. It looks like we got success. Check the network. We got a 200. Things are looking good. And I will check the database, and it says cool beans as well. Now we'll get started on being able to view this question on this question URL. All right, so if we want to create an endpoint that is like this, or a URI that is like this, then we need to first create within AskJack, we need to create a question directory, and then we need to have a route parameter of ID and then .view. And so now someone can go to question or AskJack/question/some ID, and then we'll be able to access that ID there. All right, and here we will add our script tags. We will get the parameter ID, and then we will fetch the question from the database. And here is just a little bit of output so we can see what's happening. Now this get param is a custom composable that I created, which I mentioned in a previous video, but I will just paste it in here under composable. Sorry, that's components. Under composables, I will just paste it in here. To recap what it does, essentially, if you use the use route and you get the route params, there's no telling whether or not it's actually there. There's no error if you're asking for a param that doesn't exist. So in development, you might get it wrong. Let's say we had question ID here instead of ID. That would not throw an error. And we want that to throw an error because it's very relevant. We'll see what that error looks like in a minute. But for now, we'll just build this API endpoint, which would be AskJack and then question. We already have AskJack, so we just need to make a question.ts. So we go to API AskJack. We can make question.ts, and here we'll get some imports and we'll make an event handler where we use the query and then we get the ID from the query. We parse it as an int so that we can pass it on to find question, which we will create in a second in the AskJack repository. So let's go down to the AskJack repository, and so far we've only got create question, and here we will add a find question where we just pass the ID of the question, and we also want to include the answers if there are any. So if we go back here, that looks like it should do. All right, let's restart the server. All right, cool. So we can see that from the database, we do have this question and we have the array of answers, which there are none now, but now we can flesh this thing out, make it look a bit nicer, but essentially we have the connection between the front end and the API, which is what we wanted. Now to quickly show what could happen if you don't check this param name. So let's just say we use question ID. I'm not sure if I'll need to restart the server here. Let's check it out. There we go. This is because of this custom composable. And if I didn't have this, I might think that this question exists, this question ID exists as a route parameter. And, let's see what will get passed back to us if we didn't have this error. So if we go to route params, so the normal way to do it would be to check the route params like this. So we would do use route. So we'll get rid of that real quick. And we'll just say the question ID is this. So question ID. Now, when we refresh, we don't get an answer here, but there's also no sign that we've done anything wrong. And this is just showing up as null as far as I know. We can say is equal to null, and that's true. So if you can see that in the corner there. So we're just getting null back. And so I just want to emphasize to you that you want to put in those sorts of checks on your own if they're not already available. I mean, as the framework matures, so this addition matures, things like that will be baked in, I'm sure. But, for now, cover your own behind and make sure that you have some sort of sanity checks when you're using named parameters and things like that. All right, so now we get the error, which we should. Now, if I go back to ID, now we're getting what we want. And now we can move on to fleshing this thing out and making it prettier. I've jumped a bit forward in time here to save time, but I will go over this entire component with you step by step right now. As you'll see, the basic bare bones are the same. We're getting the question from the database, And then if we do have the question, we're going to show the author name. We're going to show the description, title. And then if there are any answers, we're going to loop through those answers and we're going to show the author and text of those answers. In addition, we now have a form which will be shown if show answer form is true. And this form is a component, which I'll click through to now. And to show you where that is, it's under components, elements, answer form. In the form, we have one prop, which is the question ID. As you can see, we're passing it like that here. In addition, we have a emit. So we're going to emit an event. That event is called down here. When we add an answer, we're going to emit that to the parent. So we can, if we scroll up to the top here, we have the add answer so that we don't need to refresh the page whenever someone adds an answer. So if we add an answer, we want to see that right away. One quick tip is for debugging is to check the API call in the front end. It's nice to be able to see that in the browser. So in the DevTools, you could set a debugger. That's also one way to do it. Another way to do it is to go ahead and set server false here. Then whenever we refresh, you can see that this call is going to be made from the front end, so in the browser to the server. Now, this isn't something you would want to keep. It's something just for debugging purposes, and there are, I'm sure, scenarios where it would make sense to do as well. But in general, we want to let Nuxt do its thing and let that server-side rendering happen. But if you're not getting a response or you're, let's say, having trouble understanding what the problem is, then adding that server false is a good way to debug that. So I'll give you an example of when I used it just recently. If I take out that slash, so obviously this is no longer a valid endpoint for the URL. And if I refresh, I'm going to get that 404, which makes it much quicker to debug a problem. And that is one quick way that you can debug in the front end. All right. So we have this AskJack sidebar, which is being used right here. And we have this answer form, which is being used down there, as we've covered. So that's basically the pages. If you want it to look exactly the same, as always, check the GitHub repository and you can see it there. So now, if we were to try to answer, as you might expect, we can write anything and we're going to get here, we get a 500. So AskJack answer. Oh, apparently I've already added that. Okay. So let's go back in and let's debug. So I already added the AskJack answer and it's just an empty endpoint here. So let's see what that says. It says invalid lazy handler result. It should be a function. That makes sense. We're missing our handler function here. So let's get into setting up this endpoint. All right, in this endpoint, we can add our imports. Then we can define our event handler, and then we'll use body to get the data from the body, which we will cast to a question post. And then we can use the cookie to get the auth user, the logged in user, so that we can pass the the answer along with the user ID to this AskJack repository. And in the repository, we're going to want to be able to create an answer now, which can look something like this. Then we'll need to add the answer post type, and we can add that here, .ts. And what we will want is just the text and the question ID. And then we can go ahead and type that as we're giving it. So here, so answer form is where we want to be, correct? And here we could type that as a answer post. All right. Now, if we go back to the AskJack repository, so now we'll see we just have the author ID and the question ID, question ID and the text. And that should do it for that. Can we go here? I guess it's easier just to go around like that. So now we're given this data, and let's see, what is the problem here? We have question post here. It should be answer post. Copy paste failure. All right. And everything looking good there. So with a bit of luck, let's restart the server for good measure. See if we can get this on the very first time. All right, I'll refresh. Let's just open up the dev tools. Well, actually, yeah, it should show it probably. Very thoughtful answer. And we submit it. We got a 200 and we are already seeing the answer. Let's refresh and the answer is still there. Awesome. Let's check the database. It should be there. We've already seen it refresh once and we can see a very thoughtful answer here. So now we can successfully ask a question. So new question, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't matter what it is. And then we could also answer that question. That's awesome. Now we can get into being able to search the questions. So once we click here, we'll see that we need to create this Ask Jack search page. All right, let's go to Pages, Ask Jack, and then here we will create a search.view. And here we will add our script tags, set up in language, and then we will add a couple components, the Ask Jack sidebar we've seen before, and the question board we will create in a moment. Then we're also going to make sure this is protected by our auth middleware. And then we'll add our template where we just add a bit of pretty CSS, our logo, and then here we have the Ask Jack sidebar and then the question board. The question board we will create inside of component elements, and then we can add a question board.view. We'll also add our script tags. Then we'll have a search input, which is a ref set to an empty string at first. Then we'll have a use fetch function, which also allows us to refresh, important here, because whenever we search and the search value is length greater or equal to 3. So whenever someone puts in 3 characters, we want to start searching, and we're going to want to rerun this function each time. So that's what this refresh does. It will run the very first time when the component loads, and then every subsequent time we refresh, it will run again. And then we'll add our template, nice wrapper tag, and then we will have our input field, vModel bind it to that search input up here. And every time we input, we're going to call this search function. And then we will list out all of the questions, if we have any, and all of the answers as well. So description and then the answers as well. Once we click to that, I think that might actually not be right, but we'll check that in a minute. So let's see what we've got so far. I'll restart the server, yarn dev. All right, and now we can see here, I just had it for development purposes, showing how many characters are there, showing that it is reactive. Perhaps that's easier to see with light mode. Sorry if I'm hurting your eyes. So now we have this, and we can see we are making calls, which are going to a 404. So we're going to need to add our endpoint here, which will be Ask Jack and then search. So in the, let's close all these, in Ask Jack search, so server API Ask Jack, and then we'll create a search.ts. And here as well, we will add our imports, define our event handler, and then we're just going to search. We can just return here. We don't need to return. You can see yourself already improving code that you wrote a month ago, and a month later, it's no longer sufficient. I find that funny. I'm always like that. So now we can simply get the query, and then we're simply passing on the query dot search as a string to search the database. Here in the Ask Jack repository, down here, we will add our new search function. Unlike the other functions, we are just selecting it raw here. And the reason for that is there is no other way that I have found to be able to search text unless you're using a full-blown full text search. And for the purposes of this tutorial, this will suffice. If you do it like this, it is actually escaped these $ ones here. That's this that is getting past to that. So it is being escaped. I would call it safe, but you'll have to determine that on your own if you want to have a query like this. All right, so now we should be able, let me restart the server real quick. We should be able to search. So I believe there was something with a cool, no, we're still getting a 404. All right, let's see why. So the question board is going to Ask Jack search. We have Ask Jack search. And then we're getting the query parameter. So why are we getting a 404? Are we getting a 404 because it's just not finding anything? No, page not found. API search, okay, not found. And let's see, Ask Jack search. Okay, it's definitely there. API, Ask Jack search. Search is cool. Maybe it's Prisma that's giving us the 404. Let me make sure I'm searching something that we have. Oh, we do have cool there. So that should be working. And Ask Jack search. Tell me if you ever have these sorts of problems. API, Ask Jack search / we don't need a slash there. That was the problem. And now it should be working better. Let's see. It's still calling that. I'm going to have to restart the server. All right. Now we can see already that it's working. And we can see if we start adding our parameters here, our search query, then it will it will filter out the ones that don't match. All right, so now we can search through and we can click through the question and someone can answer that question potentially. And we have ourselves a little forum here. Another thing that would be super cool is if we actually saw who wrote these questions and answers. And we can do that pretty easily by going to the API Ask Jack questions, and then we can just add it in like that. And instead we'll say const question here. Now let me go through the code. So what we'll do is for every question, we will get the user by their ID, and then we'll just return their username as the answer auth name, the author name, with the @ symbol in front of it so it looks cool. And then we got that like Twitter style @ going on. So let's restart the server real quick, I guess. Nope, it's already working. So now we can actually see who wrote it, and we can see I answered my own question. But that's pretty cool. So then we can actually attribute the questions and answers to a user. Now it would make sense to be able to edit a question or an answer. Maybe we had a typo or what have you. And if it hasn't been locked in, we're going to want to be able to edit it. So we will get into that right now. What I'd like to do now is add an edit button here so we could update this question if we'd like. Of course, we would add rules for when someone could update. If the answer's been locked in, we wouldn't allow that. But for now, we'll just get it working with the happy path. And we'll do that by, first, we'll get the user, we'll call it me, and then we'll get a show edit form. We'll set that to a reference of false. And then we'll say, we want to know if the question belongs to the currently logged in user. And we'll do that by saying is mine. And then we'll see if the author ID is the same as the current logged in user's ID. And then once we do that, we can add a button here and the form. And the button we'll say show edit form. So we'll update that to true. And which means it will actually start showing here because we have vif equal to show edit form. And you'll notice I added a few things to this question form, which is the endpoint and the data. The data is this question here, which we already have because we're on this question page. And we'll pass that into the question form. Now, like magic, behind the scenes, I updated this question form. Now you'll notice we actually have a prop. We have an interface with the question post and the endpoint. And then we've typed the defined props like this. So we created the interface and then we type the props. And then we can do props endpoint here for the endpoint, and for the data, which is, if we click through, we have the ID, title, and description. And that will be vmodel bind it down here to data and title. So when we update it, we'll be able to make this post. So let's see if we need to restart the server to see this. So we got the edit button, and now we've got the form button. So this is question number, let's see what it is. It's question number 1. So cool question. I'll just update it like that. And then we'll just say cool beans here. And we didn't see anything updating. Let's see. The network is not showing anything. There's 2 ways we could do it. We can just check the database. We could also just refresh. So we see that did not go through. Oh, there we go, a 404. And that makes a lot of sense because we did not create this endpoint. But we can see that we're sending the right stuff. Let's see. So we are sending the right stuff to the database. So now we just need to update that question. And we can do that by going down to the API, and we have this question here. So find question. So let's copy this because it has a lot of what we want on it. And we're going to rename that to edit question. And instead of use query, we're going to use body. 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 And the body will be equal to, can we add this type here? I question post. Or could we I question post here? So it's missing the title and description, it says. So what I'll do is I'll just set a debugger here real quick, and then I'll start the app like so. It's always nice to get some live debugging in. And I have my debugger set. So if I go back and I submit again after, we'll make sure the server started. All right, looks like it started. And if I go here and so we're still getting the 404. Let's see what I added as the, so it's a little wild here, but we'll see what did I add as the question form. So question form as the endpoint. I did API question, so this is the reason that's not working. So we'll go to edit question. So first we'll let that update. Make sure we're sending it to the right endpoint. And it is sending it to edit question, but it's still not going. Why is that? API ask Jack edit question. It needs to be ask Jack. So this is a little more unpolished than usual, but you'll get to see stupid mistakes live in action and how to fix them. So now we're hitting the endpoint, and we can see the body has the data and we have the ID. So we need to go body data.id. Is that correct? Body, data. Let's see what happens when we just say body data.id. 1. That's what we want. But it's already 1. We don't need to parse an int here. We actually have what we need. And this is actually not correct. We're going to take that off of there, and we're just going to say const data, and then we'll do I question post is equal to body dot data, and then we can just say data ID here. And that's an easier way to type that. So now we'll be able to find the question. We'll have the question, and we don't need any of that. And now we can steal a little bit from the other one, which is ask. And we'll say, instead of create question, we will do edit question. So return, yeah, we can return that. So we will edit question, and we're going to send in the data as we have, or in this case, we don't really need a user ID. We'll go ahead and add it. The reason I'm going to add it is perhaps we want, admins to be able to edit a question to make it more understandable or something like that. So we'll leave that there. So get user by ID, we will get user by session token. We'll grab that. We can get rid of this. And as far as the create question, we can grab that. And we'll just edit it to be edit question. And of course, we'll need to create that. So let's see, we can just use event here. And auth token, getting the auth token, that makes sense. And then edit question, obviously we don't need that extra return statement. So we're finding the question by the question ID. Description equals data.description, question.title equals data.title. I'm not sure why that is, let's see, of type string. So use cookie, it's the same as it is over here, right? Or should I do .req? Do you know what the problem is? I'm not importing that here. So if I use cookie from H3, then it will work. It's funny that it says that instead of, missing import statement. But so once you have the import statement, then it will work. And you could actually clean that up a little bit. You don't need that REQ on there. Okay, so now we're going to pass the question in to edit question. And if we click through, we have no edit question, so we will need to create that. And here is what that edit question can look like. We will add can we add a type here? Will it type it automatically? Okay, I question posts, that should do it. All right, now let's get the server running. I turned off the debugger. All right, cool beans. Amazing. Still 404. Now, Ask Jack edit question. Why is that a 404? We have Ask Jack. We have edit question. Now, I'm going to assume the user.id is not necessary. Let's see. Return. Perhaps because we didn't have a return. Dude. Cool. Now we have a post. And if we refresh, see we have dude and cool there. Now we have dude and cool. So now we are able to edit. So we have created and we have updated. We have read. So we create, read, update, and delete. The last thing we would want is a delete button. And we'll do that also on the question. And it will basically be very similar to creating the edit button. We don't really need a form in this case. We'll just say we'll add a button. And so that button will also be only if it's theirs. And we'll say delete question. On click delete question. That's about all we need. So delete. And I'm sure you'd want to add confirmation before you did that. And maybe you'll have a check, you know, if the question has been answered and lots of people have viewed it, you don't want to delete it. But in this case, we'll go ahead and just delete. So we'll add a function and we'll call it delete question. And we will do method. There we go. Post. And we want to have a body. And that body will be question ID. And that's it. That's all we need. And once it's deleted, we will push back somewhere else. So do we have router here? Nope. We could const router is equal to use router. So first we will show message, show deleted equal to true. And then we'll do, so the reason I have that, so we can copy this, we need another show delete. So we'll only show it's been deleted. So it will normally be false, but once it's been deleted, we'll show it. And then we'll do a set timeout. And then we will say router push, and we'll go to ask Jack search. So that will send us back to ask Jack search. Okay, so show deleted equals true. Do I need a this or what? Because it's a constant. Oh, dot value. Dot value. All right, and so show deleted, we'll say here, somewhere like here. Question deleted. Deleted. Okay, and then we'll just say if show question deleted. Let's just go true right now because I just want to see what it looks like. So question deleted. We'll do a so now, yeah, question deleted, and we'll go with BG, and now we have it looking like that if it's showing, and then we'll just say show deleted. All right, so now it will only show up if it got deleted, and then it will push to the Ask Jack search. So we need to create this endpoint here. Ask Jack delete questions. We'll go to Ask Jack. So we have edit question already here. We'll just say delete question. We'll copy that, rename it, delete question. What did I just call it here? Yeah, delete question. Let's see, delete question. We can find the question, and we'll just say delete question here. Use body. We only want I'm not sure if it will be wrapped in data or not, but we want that question ID, that's for sure. Let's actually set a breakpoint because I'm not sure if it's wrapped in body or not. So it's always good to set a debugger. And we will see if we're hitting the endpoint at all when we push the delete button. All right, click delete. Bam, we're there. And the body is, let's see what this data is undefined. We only have question ID. So body question ID, we could just give that here like that and get rid of those. We don't need them. We don't need that. And we're just needing the question ID So we're making sure we have the question, and then we're just going to give the question.id here. Of course, we would want to protect this route with a middleware. Also, someone could technically call this API and not be the owner. So just as we did earlier, we want to say is mine, and we want that to be equal. So the user ID should be equal to the question auth ID. And we can just make that a const. And if it's not, is there we go. Const is mine. Const is mine is, so if that's false, then we want to send an error. Yeah, we can send an error like that. I'll grab it from H3. And here we'll say 403 unauthorized, because in this case they are authenticated, but they're not authorized to do this. Then we'll go ahead and delete the question. Of course, we need to change this to delete and go into the repository, and then we could essentially copy this, just adding delete here, and then say delete. And I don't think we need that data. And that should do it. All right, now let's see what happens. Let's restart the server. Oh, I have the debugger on. So let's start the server normally. All right, moment of truth. I got sent back to search. Delete was, however, a 500. And let's see what that 500 is. Preview. The reason being is because I only send in the question ID, correct? So this should be just be a number. And now let's retry it. A little bit of trial and error. Never hurt anybody. Also, not finding it. Let's see why not now. Let's debug again. Let the server restart. All right, so the body.question, is that producing a question? I believe that's already given us an error, isn't it? Okay, let's see what this body, maybe I didn't get the correct question here. I'm not getting the ID apparently. There we go. So body is 1. And we need to parse this as an int. Parse int. So that should give us a better result then. All right, question.body, parse int. And now we're getting the question. There we go. Exactly what we need. And if I click through here, I'm sent back this, I believe, is in state. So let's see if this has been taken out. Question. Nope, the question is still there. Let me turn off the debugger, start it normal, and see if that works. Still getting a 500 foreign key constraint. Because we have an answer. All right. So how do we take care of this foreign key constraint? So we want to say on cascade. Let's check out the Prisma docs. Delete many, cascading deletes, delete related records. So the following query, delete API to delete a single record. It's possible to do cascading, so referential actions. And apparently we need to add that on delete to cascade in our Prisma schema. So we have different relationships in the answer. If the question is deleted, then we should on delete cascade. Now I will run the Prisma migrate again. And then we'll do yarn dev again. And this should work. Lord willing and the creek don't rise. All right, we got a 200. So this should be gone now, and it is. So it is in state. We see, so we have this test. I delete, we go back here, but this is still in the state. If I refresh, it will then not show up. So we also want to push this out of the state immediately once we delete it. So the questions are question board. So we're getting sent back, but it's not refreshing. So here's where we're landing, if I'm not mistaken. No, Ask Jack search. Yeah, Ask Jack search is where we're landing. Let's check that out. Ask Jack search. And this question board is what is showing. That's what I thought. So the question board is showing, and it already has the questions through the search, and it's not repeating it because it's already had it once. Maybe we could just call this refresh one time. So let's try that. So we have this new delete here. That did not work. But we can delete that as well. Oh, that time it worked. All right. Let's see. It does work. So it just needed a second to refresh. So now we can, let's say we ask the questions, new question. We'll go, so some lorem ipsum there. We can edit it, update it. That should be, instead of ask question, we need to replace this button here, actually. I'll let you do that. So how would you replace this button? Let me know how you do that in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.